Hello and welcome to Movie Vault 666. My name is Chris, and I hope everyone is ready for another spooky outing, as today we're going to be looking at the paranormal thriller Death of a Ghost Hunter. Now, I'm not in the habit of reviewing award-winning films, but Death of a Ghost Hunter is a 2007 winner of Best Screenplay at the New York City Horror Film Festival, possibly making it the most prestigious film I've reviewed to date, which is all kinds of sad when you really think about it. So let's bear in mind that this really is champion material as we take a look at Death of a Ghost Hunter. The film starts in 1982 in the Masterson house, although more importantly at 9:45 p.m, as the title card reveals, as a woman kills her entire family before committing suicide in a scene that probably would have been shocking if any emotional weight had been put into it. We are then treated to a text opening explaining what paranormal investigation is for some reason, before dropping in an extra spoiler if the title didn't tip you off, and we get to meet our main character. Gee, I sure hope she survives.
I left home early this morning. I gave some serious thought to driving down the coast, but realized that taking Interstate 5 through Sacramento would be faster, albeit not as scenic.
This is Carter Sims, a professional ghost hunter who is so famous that she got her name underlined with a text introduction. She's on her way to a new investigation whilst writing in her journal. This is the perfect opportunity to give some real insight into our main character. Not that you'd know that, as the film doesn't give any.
Journal entry number 2. I left Riverside as soon as the sun came up and took I-10 to Phoenix. I kept thinking that the desert was such a lonely place. I started fixating on a scenario where my car broke down and I was stuck out here in the middle of nowhere.
But we didn't have the budget to film that, so it's not important.
However, all doom-laden premonitions aside, I arrived in Queen Creek on time.
My boss, Ed Hawken, was already there.
Actually, it's Seth Masterson, the house owner. And before you ask, no, he never stops doing that Owen Wilson-style squint. Now, if you find Carter to be kind of boring to listen to, as I do, well, you're shit out of luck, as she narrates far too much, with the film even using her dull monologues in place of actual conversations for the most part. The only reason I can think of may be due to the acting talent of the supporting cast. For example, let's just listen to Seth here trying to explain the incident that made him hire Carter in the first place, and try to keep in mind that he's actually supposed to be terrified here.
After the death of his father, Seth came to the house to assess its market value. After spending a few minutes in the house, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread and was compelled to leave quickly. While getting back in his car, he glanced back at the house and claims to have witnessed something that, to this day, still keeps him up at night.
Now, my uncle had 2 kids, Peter and Suzanne. My cousin Peter and I were the same age when he died. Yeah, I only met him a couple of times, but I remember what he looked like. Yeah, that night, I saw him in that window. That was his bedroom. That was the room he was killed in.
Whoa, it's almost like I was there, man. Carter seems excited that Seth was reluctant to talk about the incident immediately, as she thinks it shows he is telling the truth. But she's less excited that Seth has recruited some technical people to help her document things.
That's when Seth added a twist that I was not expecting.
I have one extra request. You won't be working alone. I've brought on a small team here to help you document things.
This might come off as me sounding difficult, but I actually prefer to work alone.
I understand, believe me, I do. But I'd personally feel better if they were here with you.
After learning about the help, which I'm calling right now will provide an early cheap jump scare, Carter begins her investigation of the house, where her heavy monologues begin to provide some purpose, and does allow us to glean some insight into her method and thoughts as she scours the house.
Even though it was in the middle of the day, the interior of the house was very dark. I immediately noticed that a few small lamps and picture lights were on, which I found to be odd, but the darkness was heavy. I prefer to maintain the natural ambiance of a site whenever possible. I believe that the level of psychic energy is best preserved when least disturbed.
Hey.
So with a jump scare so telegraphed it's a wonder they didn't do it via semaphore, we get to meet Colin, the first of the backup.
I didn't mean to scare you.
Why'd you sneak up on me then?
Well, I didn't. I rang the doorbell a few times and called out. Nobody was here, so I came in.
Well, I didn't hear you.
It's not like I was whispering either. But, I'm Colin, by the way. I'm the video guy.
Carter Sims. Colin Green nearly got kicked in the balls, but I decided to let that one slide.
Because that would have been a totally reasonable reaction? We're also quickly introduced to Yvette, whose delivery makes it hard to determine how sarcastic she's being.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Yvette Sandoval with the Arizona Daily.
Oh, you must be the writer. Hi, I'm Carter. Welcome.
Carter, wow, it's so interesting to meet you. It's going to be fascinating to watch you work.
However, a third person arrives without warning, despite Seth saying there would only be 2 people assisting Carter, and they are clearly upset over Yvette's bad joke.
And I read some of your book, and I thought the analysis statements were very credible.
Thanks.
I mean that.
Thank you.
And the way these people were off in this house, I bet the ghosts are going to be lining up for you.
How about a little reverence for the dead?
This is Mary Elizabeth, Protestant England II. Okay, I know that the screen doesn't say that, but she may as well be, given how subtle she is. Anyway, Carter quickly points out that Seth never said that Mary was supposed to be there, but Mary says that she is supposed to be there, and it's not like Carter is an investigator or anything, so nobody questions anything after that, even though she claims to be representing a fundamentalist church, but aren't typically known for their ghost hunting units. With everyone finally at the house, Carter says that the team should get settled in and have a meeting later, whilst Colin wants his equipment moved in, and after a mere 2.5 hours, they actually get his stuff moved in and begin the meeting.
And also, if somebody wants to give me a hand, I got some gear outside. I could really use some help.
Sure.
All right, cool.
The meeting begins, and Carter hands out the keys that Seth gave her.
There you go. You're welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. For some reason, Seth only gave me 3 keys.
Oh, well, nothing odd about that then.
But I thought you can just have mine, since I don't plan on leaving the property till we're done.
So for some reason, the team has another meeting almost immediately after the first one in a different room, as Carter runs down the police reports of the Masterson family, which you will almost certainly forget as once again there is no real gravity and it's all very clinical. The most interesting thing about the recap being that it states that the murderous mother's suicide note attributed the deaths of her family to anonymous killers, when we know it was her. Less interestingly, token faith girl rebukes the idea of suicide so we can have some more pointless drama. If you're interested, there is quite an interesting rundown of how Carter handles paranormal investigation, which is reasonably well explained without getting too boring or technical, followed by an explanation of Colin's technical setup. Then, for no reason, Carter describes 2 types of hauntings, including one, known as a residual manifestation,
Drawing attention to itself. A residual haunting is when the psychic energy from a traumatic event becomes...
The resident evangelist wanders off and finds a magical whispering portrait that gives her visions and gives a new meaning to Bloody Mary.
Why did you leave me out there? I'm a person too. You don't need to act like I don't exist.
Mary Young, are you okay?
Of course I'm okay. Why are you asking me that?
You need to come with me.
So once the other characters have had a good old chuckle at her expense, Mary unexpectedly fills out the booby quota before Colin is present as the chair moves of its own according. Of course, it just so happens that every single camera was off at that point, so with a smell of sulphur, the movement ceases and the characters are obviously overwhelmed by the events of the previous night.
I don't think I'm going to get any sleep tonight.
Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah, it might be better to sleep during the day. That way we can be ready to go again by nightfall.
I said they're overwhelmed! Don't forget it. The next day, Carter and Colin review the footage and audio they captured, and Colin finds he has captured actual fucking footage of a ghost, as well as some audio which you would think would be the end of the investigation, or at least prompt telling someone, but apparently we'd all be wrong. Instead, we cut to a pointless bickering scene between Yvette and Mary, after which Yvette finds some photos of the Mastersons, which seem to cast them in a different light than the way Mary had described them. Meanwhile, Mary decides to get some revenge on Yvette in her usual calm, level-headed fashion. They also find a handy-dandy box, which they decide was meant to be worn like a helmet, meaning that now the team has 2 head cases. So with things starting to kick off and actual progress being made, Colin and Yvette decide that now is the best time to calm their nerves, and head up to the bedroom to make bad jokes and criticise the decor.
I'm scared. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to bring him out here. To these woods.
Hey, leave the lame jokes to me! Things really start to escalate that night, and whilst it might have been smart to have things happen to Colin and Yvette as they are high, and things would therefore at least be a little bit ambiguous, instead Carter actually sees ghosts with her own eyes and is knocked flat by one of the spirits. This shows her some of the ghost's memories and leaves the team with enough evidence that he would have surely thought it would be worth speaking to somebody. But instead Carter decides to prove that the whole thing is a residual haunting by establishing a pattern. Of course, in this film, no day's events would be complete without an argument with Mary, of course, so she breaks out some pretty severe insults.
She went through me, and I felt her. I felt her anger and her pain, and I saw with her eyes, and I'm telling you, she murdered those children.
Stop saying that about them. You're nothing but a stupid, godless person. I won't let you disgrace them like that.
How do you know she didn't do it, Mary Young?
No Christian mother would kill her children like that.
I hate to break it to you, but these people were not as saintly as you make them out to be.
Then it's too bad your mother didn't try to kill you.
I think it's time for you to leave, Mary Young.
So the third day begins, and Colin receives a phone call. However, the person on the other end doesn't seem to recognise Mary Young by name.
Last night, Mary Young fucking got in a fist fight with Carter. Mary Young. You know, Mary Young.
Although, it's not like this revelation could affect the plot, right? I mean, Carter kicked Mary out last...
We need to talk.
You have got to be fucking kidding me! How stupid are these people? So for some reason, Carter decides to make amends with Mary. But she's interrupted by Colin telling her she needs to speak to Zeth. And she decides to tell him about her fight with Mary.
It's not what I'm talking about. It's this Mary Young person.
Oh, yeah, we had an altercation. But, you know what, it's gonna be fine. We'll talk it out.
No, it's not. She's not supposed to be there. I don't even know who she is.
Hold up a minute here. This is going too fast. Is this film trying to say that Mary is an imposter? So with Mary exposed, the team sensibly decide to throw her out, but in a less sensible decision, decide to let her go claim her baggage unescorted. They do manage to get her key back, and she leaves with surprisingly little fight, leaving the whole scene like an unruly housemate being kicked out of a student flat. It's also around this time that Yvette finds what Mary has done to her bag, and decides to use her reporter powers to investigate Mary.
Me? Smell my fucking bag, Carter.
Oh. Are you sure she did it?
It was either her or one of you two. That's it. I'm gonna find out about this bitch. Watch.
So surprise, surprise, Mary has a history of outbursts, including defecation in public, and she is actually too crazy for our local fundamentalist church, and as such has been acting on a personal crusade this entire time. So with that intrusive subplot taken care of, the team prepare for their last day of investigation, or to put it in a more ominous sounding way...
Thank God this night will be our last.
This film already has a spoiler in the title. Do you really have to lay the foreshadowing on so thick? Carter and Colin wait for the repetition of activity that they had previously observed, but nothing occurs. Meanwhile, we catch up with Mary Young as she reveals her ventriloquist act whilst phoning into a radio show.
Hello, you're on the air. What's your name?
Mary Young.
God bless you, child. What is it that you want to tell me?
I know these people that are doing a very unchristian thing, and I've been driving around all day thinking about how I can stop them.
So, naturally, the host's advice is really ambiguous, and Mary decides to head back to the house with the intention of murdering the main characters. She easily dupes Colin enough to get her key back, while the team decides to investigate another part of the property. But whilst they're off investigating, Mary sneaks into the house and decides to try the box from earlier on. This time, however, she has a photo part that I guess lets her see images and then she dies, I think. Now, Yvette has a good idea of phoning the police as she is worried about Mary Young sneaking around the property. However, she's distracted by a voice and decides to investigate alone without alerting anyone. Because what's the worst that could happen?
It hurts.
Oh yeah, that. So Colin heads back to the main building and takes his camera with him, as Yvette's voice calls out to him. So he decides to wander off alone and is also picked off, leaving just Carter remaining. Of course, Carter was already doomed due to the title and doesn't last long. with that anticlimax, we are treated to a heavy-handed segment as the film literally explains the entire plot. So in addition to adding more gratuitous nudity, the film also fills in any plot details that the audience missed. Now, given the fact that we already knew that everyone died earlier in the film, there's little relevant information here. In fact, whilst we do learn that Mary Young was the baby born earlier on in the film, born to a young girl that the father had kept as a sex slave, it really adds very little, except trying to push a rather on-the-nose idea of events repeating themselves. But here's the thing. The film might think that it's very clever by trying to set up this eternal loop of events repeating themselves, but without a baby having been born this time around, who is going to repeat the events in the next cycle? Unfortunately, this ending is slow, pointless, and heavy-handed, and really drags the film down. In fact, I would like to say it is the worst part of the film and a terrible way to end a movie. I would like to, but unfortunately, instead we get an even worse ending. Yes, welcome to the Mirror Ghost dimension, as Carter awakes on the other side and begins exploring. As she does so, she hears what is presumably the gunshot fired by the mother from the beginning, which may just wake you up if you were beginning to nod off before she discovers that she is trapped in the house. So Carter gives a boring monologue about being dead and fades away. So sad.
My name is Carter Sims. I don't really know what happened, but I don't think I'm alive anymore.
Oh, except once again, because this film has more endings than Return of the King, apparently, we also have to show the part where Carter explained about the different types of haunting, because maybe there are one or two morons out there who might not have gotten that yet. Before we are shown a text scroll informing us that this investigation is supposed to be widely regarded as absolute proof of life after death. No, movie, you can't do that. That's not how found footage works. Found footage, it's supposed to be believable this tape is out there somewhere. That's the whole point of the gimmick. You can't have anything this outlandish happen in a found footage film because we would have heard about it. You either have to have a more subdued film where it's more ambiguous and maybe people wouldn't have heard about it because it's a legend, or you have a ridiculous film and you don't make it found footage. This is supposed to have happened in real life. The fucking text scroll would have had to look like this. So this might be one of the most incompetently handled endings I've ever seen, which is a shame because this film actually does some things that I quite like. This is a film which actually tries to get you attached to the main characters and doesn't rely on tired cliches for the most part, Mary Young not standing. The film also tries to build an atmosphere and doesn't rely on cheap gore or jump scares, but most importantly, the film gives some explanation of the techniques and methodologies being used. They come across as fairly authentic. Unfortunately, the film's flaws are far too glaring to forgive. Whilst the main characters are fairly realistic, if a little bland, Mary Young sticks out as a stock character who just cannot be taken seriously and serves little purpose except to push the film's ultimately failed attempt at creating a perfect circle with its ending. Equally, the found footage angle comes across as unnecessary and creates quite a few plot holes. And the deaths of the characters were pretty lackluster as they happen purely through disappointing sound effects with no real intensity. Overall, I would maybe recommend this to people who have a real interest in paranormal activity. To anyone else who isn't all that interested in the ins and outs of ghost hunting, I would say that this is just a weak thriller with bad acting and a disappointing ending. So with that said, I've been Chris, and I'll see you next time on Movie Vault 666.